You're probably wondering how you got here. It's the Woodworking Morning Show.
Let's get ready to compare two ridiculously expensive sanders! These sanders only have one job, Gene, and today we're going to see which one spins in circles better. Festool's the German powerhouse that's equally as good at removing wood as it is at removing money from your wallet. Mirka, the lighter champ hailing from Finland. It's yellow. It's Finnish. There's a joke in there somewhere. Come watch these sanders duke it out in the epic battle of our generation. Festool. Mirka. Who said sanding is boring? That's how you start a show. Am I right? Yeah. All right, hey, if you aren't familiar, if you haven't seen that or you haven't been on the page today, we did publish a new video, finally, the Mirka versus the Festool sander. That whole little comparison video is out and ready for you to eat it up. Todd did a great job. We last minute, I was like, dude, I want to do something funny for this to promote it on Instagram. And it turned out to be something that I really wish I would have put in the actual video.
Hey, Todd's in the chat room.
So yeah, Todd whipped that thing up super quick. All I did was give him a voiceover. It was his idea to do like a wrestling or boxing thing.
I love it.
I just did the voiceover and then he made the rest happen. So
hey,
having a professional editor is very handy.
Welcome.
Oh, by the way,
to our live show.
This is our live show. It's Wood Whisperer Live.
It's not the morning for us. I'm sure it's morning.
We'll get those intros fixed
we'll
eventually.
We'll fix them.
But anyway, I'm Mark, if you didn't know.
And I'm Nicole.
And we're going to answer woodworking questions from the chat room. Folks who helped us out on Patreon as well on YouTube in the membership area. We've got questions pre-selected from those folks. We'll get to as many as we possibly can.
And I will be taking questions from the YouTube chat room. As you ask questions, I copy and paste them and then ask them, pepper them throughout.
And of course, we like to highlight the people who help us out. So I want to thank John Cutbirth, John Berger, Bill Collins, Kelly Phelps, Melanie Loverick, Johnny Matevich, sorry, Johnny, the Average Swede, Philip Schaefer, Dirk Cummings, Matt Buttrell, and Randy Parker.
Thank you.
That one I can say. Randy Parker. Makes sense to my brain.
All right.
Yeah, so,
do we have a main topic for the show today?
Yeah, and something I want to try to do with these live shows is to hit a topic in the
volume
beginning.
is low.
Volume is low.
I told him if he played that video, it was going to mess the volume up.
No, it's fine. You people shush.
Steve Miller.
All right, so I did want to start to do something a little more interesting. A lot of people don't love the live format, but I want to give you some meat. Some meat to chew on. You can pull it off the bone.
Says your mic's not working.
Oh, you guys. They're probably right. Sorry.
You mess with something.
I didn't mess with anything.
You played a video.
Oh, well, I did do that. But it's only the echo cancellation. I don't know. I don't know what you want from me.
All right.
I do want to make sure you guys hear something.
So here.
Al says it sounds fine here.
Okay. All right.
We go periods of a year with zero technical difficulties, and then out of nowhere we have one problem, and then week after week it's a problem until it resolves again. So if there's problems, I'm sorry.
Everybody's saying, is this speak up please? But no, sounds fine. Everybody's saying sounds fine.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the people who said it's fine, the people who say speak up.
I'm booming. I'll lower my mic now. Tommaso.
Gosh,
all right,
you guys.
It's fine. Just go.
Okay, all right, I'm a little bit louder now. Is that a little bit better? A little bit better? God.
It's fine.
Oh, God.
Just go.
This is why the person running the show shouldn't read the chat room. Yeah. It messes things up. All right, anyway, so my goal today was to just give you a quick overview of something that, I think a lot of us probably take for granted, tape measures. How much do you think about tape measures? I know I don't think much about them.
I always see the posts in the Facebook groups where somebody has 5 of them and they line them all up to show how they're all different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oops.
A delay is not something we're worried about, guys. It's just volume. If there's delay, that's something we have absolutely zero control over. So I did want to talk a little bit about our trusty tape measures. Not super in depth. Let's just, if you're a beginner, this is going to be useful information to you. But tape measures come in all shapes and sizes. If you talk to some fine woodworkers, you might hear things like, tape measures are inaccurate. Maybe they're not good enough for fine woodworking. Yet I still have a whole mess of them in my shop. And part of the reason is because obviously the length, some of our most accurate woodworking measuring devices that we have in the shop are maybe 12 inches. If you go into my woodpecker stuff is over there on the wall, which is why I'm looking over there. You can get things that are like 24 inches long and straight edges that are that length, but you certainly can't do something 10 feet long with like an aluminum or steel straight edge.
Is that the Max one?
This is the Stanley Fat Max.
Fat Max.
Right, so even though these are sort of notoriously construction grade type tools, they still can come in handy for woodworking. And one of the reasons is because what I recommend you do is use one. Like if you're gonna pick a project and get into a project, stick with one tape measure. Because if there's small errors between this one and the one next to it, commit to one, and then that should help minimize things. A lot of us also use relative dimensioning. So if your board, let's say the project calls for a 12-inch board, you measure out 12 inches. Well, even if you're slightly off, you usually set up a fence or a stop. And that's what actually dictates the length of the part. So even if you're just like a 16th under or over, that usually doesn't matter as long as your parts are consistent, right? So I want to show you what I've got here. Two things I want to talk about. One is the variety of things you could purchase, and I'll give you my recommendations. But also, we'll talk a little bit about, what I think happened? I think John put that away, and he may not have been as careful as I am about not touching the levels.
Gotcha.
He may have actually bunked it.
Do you have a video on relative dimensioning?
I have stuff. I don't know. I mean, I talk about it in context.
I'm Googling it. Oh, we actually have a video.
Perfect. Perfect, Nicole. Great job.
You put something out back in 2010.
All right, so
2010.
I got a question on Wood Talk. You'll hear it in an upcoming podcast if you listen to that show. Someone asked a really interesting question, and he said it was a dumb question. But then I really got to think about it. I'm like, I don't think that's dumb at all. So what he was asking is, on a tape measure, you have a line thickness, right? And if you're a fine woodworker and you use 0.5 millimeter pencils or knives to lay out joinery and things like that, you might look at a tape measure and think what he thinks. You go, well, that line has a thickness. My pencil line has a thickness. He's like, so if I want an accurate 1-inch cut, do I actually cut on the line? Do I go to the side of the line or the inside of the line? And I was like, that's a damn good question. I don't know. Like my rule of thumb, when it comes to cutting on a particular line is to just do the same thing all the time, right? So if you leave your line, when you mark a line, you make your cut and you leave it, or your cut consumes the line, whatever you do, just be consistent about it. I don't think that part matters. But the question was, on a tape measure, where is the true accurate 1-inch point? Which I thought was super compelling. So what I did was I took my calipers and I actually did a measure. I'm not going to do it live here because it's really finicky. And I looked at it, and as it turns out, right up to that line. Now, some of you might be going, Mark, you're a moron. We already knew this, but I didn't know this, so maybe you didn't. If you go right up to the line, that's the 1-inch point. If you go over the line at all, it is over 1 inch. So what that means is, if you transfer this 1-inch mark true to your workpiece, so you take your pencil, you try to match it to the 1-inch line, and then you cut that line away when you make your cut, that should be, at least according to 2 or 3 of my tape measures, that should be a true 1 inch.
Jeff Early likes a folding ruler.
A lot of people like folding rules. I haven't yet found the way to love them.
Is it it's a folding rule, not a folding ruler?
I think you could probably say both, okay. Right? But it's kind of an old school thing. My grandpa had one. I've got one that was kind of like a promotional thing for Festool.
I remember using them in school.
Yeah.
Al says, use a 1, 2, 3 block and mark with a knife.
Sure. That's not what we're talking about today. Nothing wrong with that,
yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Steve Miller wants to know if you've ever tried the flat tape measures from FastCap.
No, and I'll tell you what about FastCap. I keep coming back here. I did order one of I think it might have been the lefty-righty or something, the green one. And I found it to be a little flimsy, not in the tape itself, but the part on the back, I think it was like the belt clip, broke, and I don't remember the details, but I remember not being able to get the piece off, and it was kind of sharp, and I just got over it very fast. But I know FastCap does make some really sort of ingenious concepts when it comes to tape measures. So if you're looking for something special, tape measures that are like readable easily left and right, that's kind of the lefty-righty thing they do. They've got some cool stuff. But I want to show you some tape measures. Stop distracting me.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to do a show here.
I'll add all of these to our Amazon store too. So amazon.com/shop/thewoodwhisperer.
So the first recommendation I want to give you as a woodworker, you want to consider the length of your tape measure. Now you might go to Home Depot and be like, well, tape measures aren't that expensive. I'm going to splurge and get me that 25 footer. Well, I don't think you need to do that. I actually think for woodworking in the shop, 16 is the max you're absolutely going to need, Fat Max.
Yeah, Fat
Get
Max.
It? I think that's really the max you would ever really need. So why are you carrying around a giant 25-foot tape measure in a workshop when everything is probably going to be less than 8 feet? So I mean, even though I have this, that's for house stuff, DIY stuff around the house, but I do keep it in the shop.
When the kids want to measure, like, the room.
Of course, they always want to do that. The 16 is the one that I'm going to stock up on, but I don't feel the need to go any more than 16. And in fact, I like these little tiny guys.
So on Amazon, there's a Fat Max 16, $134. And I was like, what? And it's a 6-pack of them.
Oh, that makes sense. So one thing that I started to do was to grab these little 6-footers. A cool thing is if you get a little epoxy, now this one actually broke off, but if you get epoxy, put a magnet on there, you could take these and put them on your tools, so you always have one nearby. And honestly, if you think about the kind of work you do, how often do you have to measure over 6 feet? So if you have 4 or 5 of these around the shop, this could be your go-to tape measure for fine woodworking tasks. Right, so think about getting those. A couple other ones that I have here. This was the anniversary edition that Stanley put out.
I love that. That's my favorite.
That's the one Nicole keeps in her desk.
Yeah, don't touch my...
Well, this is from your desk.
Is it?
Sorry.
It's always there.
And look at this. I forgot we even had this. I found it in a drawer.
Oh, wow.
It was a promotional Wood Whisperer tape measure.
Look at that.
I don't think it's durable enough for the shop. But
there's even an earlier one with the very first logo, and it's like orange and plastic. I think Vic still has one.
This one is new to me. This was recommended by I can't remember who it was, a nice guy on Instagram, said, hey, I know you like, good quality things. He's like, I've been looking for a better tape measure, and this one is made by Tajima. This is on my recent orders on Amazon if you're looking for it. Not too expensive, considering. I mean, Fat Max tape measures are not cheap either. But what this one boasts is, first of all, and other tape measures do this too, but it locks on its own, and it's the other style where you have to push the button to have it retract, which is kind of nice.
Is that the auto lock feature? What's the auto lock feature?
That's what this is,
okay.
Yeah. So you also have a very thick, very firm tab on here. What is this called? Let's call it a dewlap. This thing here, that hook, maybe it's just called a hook. Very thick. And a lot of times that motion, that play that you have in there, that has to be pretty precise. And this one is, right? Everything that this is made with, when you compare it to your average tape measure, is generally better quality. I actually took this against my Starrett rule, and I was looking for consistency across it, and it is probably one of the most consistent series of marks that I've ever seen. In addition, check out the backside. You have the rule there as well. So there are times you might need something, or you got it on a weird angle, or you're doing something upside down, you actually have your marks on that side. So the only thing I don't like about this is the housing. It's kind of a hard plastic. You guys can probably hear and see that. I don't know how well this is going to take, a fall. And we've dropped it a couple of times. You can see the T is kind of scraped off there. It's no Fat Max. If you're on a 16-foot ladder and you drop this on the ground, the Fat Max is probably going to get up and walk. This one, I don't know if it's going to survive that. So the jury's still out on that, but I did want to recommend it cautiously, a cautious recommendation. If you're looking for a tape measure that's just a little bit better than the average, and very nice, fairly thick, comparatively speaking, in terms of how far you can actually get that guy to stand. What's that called? Stand out? Something like that? I don't know this. I don't know this stuff, guys. I'm just making crap up as I go.
I'm just measuring stuff.
So that's my thoughts on tape measures. I do think there's something you want to have in the shop, but know what they can do, what they can't do, and use them appropriately, and I think you'll be happy.
George W says, love the flat tape from FastCap.
Yep, that's a popular one. Like I said, FastCap makes some pretty interesting thingies.
The one you stole from me, how How big is that one?
This one, oh, it's tiny. It's probably the classic one's
Where
probably
did we
6
get
foot.
these?
Someone sent them to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
We're not good at this stuff.
Thank
It
you.
was a 10-foot rule.
I think we have. Did we have like 3 of them? 4 of them?
A couple of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So this one's 10 feet. The other little one that I had, the tiny Fat Max, that's 6.
Yes, the anniversary one.
It's a lot. I mean, 10 feet in this small space, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Any questions about that? We can start our regular questions, but anybody has something to say, we can certainly go back to that. You ready?
Tim JB says he uses the 25-foot one outside a lot.
And that's why I clarified.
Yeah.
I have a 25 for that same reason, but outside is probably not shop projects, furniture.
Yeah, I wasn't really. Oh, the magnet. Did you talk about a magnet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, let's get to some questions here. I got a question from Alfred Chu. He says, what might be a good hand tool project that I can make in the corner of a room, presuming that I have the tools? I am currently without a workshop. There's box making, but I was wondering if there was any other fun, small projects that can serve a function as opposed to having only aesthetic appeal. Trying to keep it small and light on dust because I have a 1-year-old running around. Thanks. All right, so I have 2 suggestions, and this is a great question for the chat room. You guys think on your toes probably better than I do. So I'm going to suggest maybe a Kumiko project. If you've never tried that, obviously milling all the little sticks might be something that would be difficult to do, but you can actually buy kits where some of that stuff is pre-milled, and then you're just doing fine cuts and real detailed work. That might be a good like project that you do in a corner without making much dust, certainly not making much noise. Along the same lines, with miters and things like that, it's just a picture frame. I don't, if you don't happen to need one, that won't be very good. But if you can make, 45-degree miters, get a shooting board so you could shoot them nice and clean, definitely a cool hand tool project I think that you could pull off. So those are the 2 that come to mind. But of course, chat room, you guys got better ideas? Float them. I want to hear them.
On the dust.
Oh, I should have put it into the first part of the show. Did you guys see the video announcement about my 3-month initiative, my 3-month challenge for myself of making weekly videos? If you haven't seen it, well, now you know. Go look for those videos. Every Friday, or actually I might switch to Sunday, weekly videos coming from the Wood Whisperer.
Sunday might be good.
You see all this? Going to see more of it. Don't know if that's what you're into, but that's what's going to happen. Okay, Daniel Kirkhart has a quick question here. How can I tell when Rubio monocoat has gone bad? I've had it just over a year and it seems to all be just fine, hoping to use it as a finish for a customer project and hate to send it off and find out the finish was bad and has some issues. Well, from my experience with Rubio, when it goes bad, it gets real clumpy. And the activator, like the part B, I think it is, the clear stuff, that will just seal up and completely solidify, and the other stuff gets chunky and gross. If you see chunks in it, you still might be able to use it if you pour off the chunks or pour off the good stuff and leave the chunks. But if you have a fully liquid can and it was sealed really well, as long as it's liquid, I think you're fine. Go ahead and use it. Yoso had a question.
Oh, I forgot. Before you do that, Joseph Mensch at the top of the show did a nice super chat and said, it's been a while since I was able to make it to a live show. Good seeing you guys.
Good seeing you, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Thanks, dude.
Is it Joseph?
Joseph.
Do you call him Joe?
I don't think he likes to be called Joe,
Joseph.
but that's why I do it. Whatever. Okay. Yoso says, so I bought the keyless chuck. I think he asked that question a couple weeks ago. And installed it in my drill press, but I failed to consider one thing. When I use a keyless chuck on my hand drill, the chuck gets locked when I'm trying to tighten it, so I can actually tighten the bit. But in my drill press, it doesn't. It ends up opening the top with the drill press disconnected, obviously, and I use the front pulley of my chuck, and I have to do this when tightening and untightening the bit, so I guess he's immobilizing it. Am I missing something? This seems way too cumbersome and dangerous. Well, I can only tell you what I do. With a keyless chuck, you don't need a whole lot of pressure, but typically on a keyless chuck, you're going to see a knurled ring at the top and then a knurled section at the bottom, and that's how you're gripping this thing, right? So what I do is just kind of tighten it up by hand, give it a little twist. It's not much, right? Those things, if it's a good quality chuck, it doesn't need a whole lot of pressure, just enough, and boom, and it's done. And then when I need to loosen it, boom, loosen it. I just don't think you need to hammer it down. Now, I don't know about your particular chuck. Again, chat room, if you guys have different ideas. I don't do anything other than that. It's all by hand, and I don't have bit slipping issues or anything like that. So maybe either yours just is different, or maybe you're trying to tighten it more than it really needs to be tightened. Okay. Bing.
Garrett Barton says, my table saw has recently started to make a noise, mostly noticeable upon startup. That sounds similar to a wobble or some sort. I've checked and the blade appears to have no noticeable wobble. The nut holding the blade isn't loose. The cut seems fine, except for maybe a slight loss of power. I'm just trying to figure out what it could possibly be from. Have you ever experienced a sound like this? The saw is relatively new, not heavily used, and I wouldn't think it's a wear and tear thing. Any info would help. I don't know. Don't know. Read the question, don't know. Troubleshooting something like that is, I'm not that much of a machine-oriented person. I mean, I use power tools, but some people know things about bearings and belts and gears, and I'm not one of those people. When you describe those sounds, though, and you've kind of looked at, is there wobbling, is there run out going on, one of the things you might look at is there a bearing that's gone bad? Sometimes the motor, if the bearing just gets all wonky, that could also cause noises and weird sounds. I've got that going on in my planer, actually. It sounds horrible, but it still works. So I guess I'm going to run it until it breaks.
There you go.
That's what you do.
Got a super chat that you got everything off to the side. Right there.
Robert Price?
Yeah.
Robert Price says, tuning in late. Apologies if someone beat me to it. Dovetails?
Oh.
Oh. My shirt. Oh, woo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fun shirt.
This is, I don't remember the dude's name. Once Upon a Workbench?
Once Upon a Workbench.
I mean, I don't remember his name. I remember his
channel.
Business, channel, whatever. Once Upon a Workbench has great woodworking t-shirts. No trademark infringement whatsoever.
Brandon B said, can somebody send me the link if Mark had a write-up on moving a shop?
Well,
boy, do we ever.
I've moved a few shops.
He has, and he's documented it. I'm going to put a link in the chat that has all of the videos and articles. Remember?
It's a plethora.
It's a plethora.
A plethora.
Plethora. Moving shop.
There you go.
It's plural.
Okay, Brad Logston wrote in. He says, everything I read regarding flattering of my shaft and stones. That's when you pick them up and you go, you're so beautiful. You little green ceramic flat beauty. I've read that regarding flattening of my shaft and stones says to do it before each sharpening session. I have a set of relatively cheap chisels. PMV 11 is on back order. I'll be replacing the cheap ones with quality ones over time, but right now I'm flattening and sharpening the cheapies. Sharpening session can literally be hours. Anyway, during a long session, how often should I stop to flatten my shaft and stones? I do it once per session. In fact, I don't do it right before I start. I try to do it at the end of the session, so it's just ready to go the next time I need to sharpen. I generally will just do it once per session. I don't think it gets that far out of whack with one single session, even if it's a couple hours of sharpening. That said, it doesn't take that much effort, and the longer you wait, the more effort it takes. So if you feel like after 45 minutes of sharpening, you want to just go to the sink, grab whatever your flattening medium is, rub those two suckers together, because it also is nice to clean up the schmutz that's on there from all the sharpening, right? That can also make it more difficult to sharpen over time. So go ahead and just use it as something to clean it up. That also flattens it, gets it ready for the next hour of sharpening. I don't see any problem doing that. I just don't think, in a couple of hours, I don't know that you're going to do so much that it's going to be a huge problem. At least that's how it's been in my hands.
See, since you're talking about sharpening, Anthony said, Mark, would you consider doing a video about Arkansas stones for sharpening hand tools?
Nope.
Maybe include your thoughts on
Never.
the hard black stone?
Can't do it.
From Dan Wheatstone.
I would think about it.
Stones?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stones out there. I can think about it. I don't have any of those is the problem, so I would need to get something. But I'll definitely keep it in mind. Kurt Allen says that he has 2 large solid wood panels that are 7/8 thick, 26 by 54 final dimensions. I need to crosscut the panels to the same length. My crosscut sled is too narrow for the width, and my MFT isn't long enough to use the stop. Would you suggest cutting both panels at the same time on the MFT to get identical lengths, or some other approach? Well, that will definitely work. I mean, as long as your saw, some of the TS55s can kind of complain on a 2-inch cut. You're almost at 2 inches at that point. But if you can do it in one cut, go for it. Maybe you got a TS75. So yes, cut them at the same time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you want to actually cut them with some kind of a stop, here's the thing, 26 inches? Does the MFT handle 26 inches? I don't remember what it is. I thought anytime it's around 24, I get nervous, but it's been a while since I've used it, so maybe it does. But what you can do is add some kind of an auxiliary strip to the top to like clamp it down to the existing aluminum fence, clamp it down, and then it could just be a board. Run it as far as you need to, just get a long strip, and then clamp a stop to that. It just becomes like an auxiliary stop. So as long as it doesn't move, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight or anything. It just has to stop those boards once they're on the fence, push it over, stops, that's it. So you can actually cobble together something. Just be careful that you don't consume much of that depth by putting it in front of the fence. Maybe clamp it on top of the fence and then have a stop that kind of goes into the business area, if you know what I mean.
Weston had a really good question. Do you tend to raise or lower your standards of quality when making furniture for yourself versus someone else?
It's all the same.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it's all the same. I don't raise or lower.
I think I might lower mine a little when I'm doing quilts.
Yeah.
When I made mine.
You're like, oh, well, it's for me anyway.
It's a blanket.
I've gotten to a point now that I have trouble stepping back, right, to lower my standards. And there are times where it's necessary, but I find it very difficult. I think I've just gotten to the point that by doing the show, even though you may, like maybe in your world, you're making things for people. I make things, of course, there's a recipient that receives that, but I have an audience, right? So I'm always thinking about that audience. That audience is maybe not, it's not the same, but they're always there. They represent this thing in my head that says, I want to impress these people. I need to have it to a certain standard so those people see what I'm doing. I actually am a little more concerned about that than the like IRL people who I'm giving the thing to.
Yeah, you're lucky. They're getting it for free. They'll be happy with what I give you.
No complaining, shut up. But like seriously, they're probably not even going to be as picky, right? They're fine with it. Yeah. So honestly, my situation is a little bit different because I feel like I always have the same customer. That's you guys. Yeah. So I have to achieve a certain standard.
Michael Moskiki.
Okay.
Sorry, Michael. What about the Festool tape measure? Did you used to have a Festool? I thought you had a Festool tape measure.
I did. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, it's around here somewhere.
I never really used it though. I had it, but I never really used it. Whoa, what is that?
Bing.
Okay.
Let's see. Someone was asking why the little hook on the end moves.
It's because when you have a tape measure, there's two ways you're going to use it. You're either going to hook it on something or you're going to put it up against something, right? So if you think about it, this thing itself...
That's the screen cap.
Yeah. The hook itself has a thickness, so you need to offset and compensate for that as you're either hooking this way or going up against something, right? So that's why it moves.
Yeah.
All right.
Todd said this 175th anniversary Stanley tape measure is still available on their website. I also found it on Amazon.
Good to know.
And I threw it in the store.
They're fun. I like them. They feel good in hand. They're dense.
They're hefty.
They're real hefty, and they just have a good feel.
Whenever the kids take it, I'm like, no, that's not yours.
We throw it at them, and they won't take it anymore. No. This is pretty heavy. Okay, Black Goat Woodworking says, got any good tips on how to determine if it's time to rotate carbide teeth on a helical head cutter? My planer and jointer are about the same age and about the same usage, so I assume when it's time to just rotate everything together. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but I would rotate them when I think I need to, right? And how do you know when you need to? Well, when it becomes a lot harder to get good results, or you find that the planer is working harder to push it through, or maybe it even stalls. Just make sure you keep waxing the table, doing all those things. But if you start to notice bad results, you can't get away with, planing figured woods, and that worked before. Passing through the jointer, doing the same, stock removal, the same amount of removal, and now it's really hard to push through, but before it was super easy, there's a good time to rotate. That said, carbide cutters, they last a long time. I mean, my planer, I think when Jason was here, we rotated them for the first time. And
I remember when that happened.
Yeah, not because I was getting really bad results, just because it had been like 4 years. Yeah. 5 years. I was like, you know what? I just feel like maybe I'm not noticing that it's not cutting as clean. Rotated them, and I go, yep, it's cutting the same. Yep. It did not really improve things because it never really got bad to begin with. That's one of the great things about it. So unless you're really seeing a reason to rotate them, I wouldn't.
Plan D Woodworks has a nice question, or interesting question.
A nice one.
Nice one. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? 5 years from now.
Right where I am today. I really don't have
I don't really project
incredible aspirations.
Yeah, 5 years from now, Mateo's going to be in middle school, high school.
I kind of, as far as like long range
kids,
plans,
yeah.
I kind of take it as it comes.
Yeah.
We kind of adjust on the fly. You know, this video change that we did, that was like a spur of the moment thing, but we've been building toward this by amassing a staff that can help us.
Someone asked how that schedule's going. It's going great. The first video came out today.
Super easy. So this is really easy.
It's week 1.
Yeah, week 1. So yeah, I don't know, 5 years, I'm going to be, I mean, that's the thing, guys, I've been doing this for 15 years. And we're still, to this day, in spite of all the life changes we've had, we're still kind of just doing the same thing we've always done and going to new platforms when they show up, adapting to trends that change in the way people want to see the content. I see myself continuing to do woodworking and then telling people about it. Pretty simple.
Wasn't that your tagline for a while? Doing woodworking and telling
people about it?
or something like that.
I think so. Andy, yes. Andy Moran says, excited to hear that there will be more videos on the way. Any teasers on some topics that you plan to cover? Well, I could, if I could reach that calendar that's sitting right over there.
I'll go get it for you.
Can you reach it?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a little preview. Thanks, Toots. All right.
Toots.
Okay. One topic I want to cover, things I wish I knew when I started woodworking. I filmed that today. In fact,
did you?
10 things. I sat and I thought about like my obstacles and road bumps that I hit early in the process of woodworking, things I wish I knew when I started. Let's see. I'm starting a whole series of buy this, not that, right? So buy this tool, not this one. Like, here's the reason why you want this one. So it's going to be an ongoing series with themes.
From a woodworker's perspective.
Well, everything I do is from a...
I understand.
You're like that commenter on YouTube.
Yeah, I am.
Some guy comments on the video I posted today, the Festool Merca review, and he's like, no offense, but it's pretty clear this review is from a woodworker. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I not say no? Dude, come on. Anyway, so there's going to be a buy this, not that regarding drills and drill bits. We'll have another one regarding table saw accessories. Let's see. Some of my favorite things is going to be a theme we're going to do. My favorite, 5 favorite hand tools. Know your router direction. And that's like understanding the hows and whys of which direction you go inside a workpiece or outside a frame. Handheld router versus table-mounted router. Let's see, table saw blades, favorite router bits, measuring tools in a buy this, not that. Actually, a lot of what we did tonight, some of that stuff is probably going to go into the buy this, not that version for measuring and layout. White lines on dark wood. We did that in the guild. A lot of these, actually, a couple of these I'm sniping from the guild. So here's where this comes down. I mean, I don't want to, it's all fun stuff. I was talking to my assistant John about this, and he was like, you know what you need to do? Categorize stuff in the shop, right? There's tools, there's materials, there's techniques, like categorize these things and just kind of, let's just brainstorm and then start rotating through. And that's how we came up with the list. So we have plenty to get us through this 3-month period. What happens after that 3 months? That's still up in the air. I don't know.
Steve Miller said he would trade me a pie safe for a quilt. I'd do that trade.
No. Where are we going to put the pie safe?
I know.
We have no room.
I just want him to make a pie safe for the show.
Yep.
It's not. I don't really need a pie safe. I like pie safe.
Sure. Karen wrote in, our good buddy Karen.
Oh, Karen.
Every time I use a compact router to chamfer edges, the bearing leaves a mark all around the piece. Bits and bearings are new and clean, and I don't feel like I'm pressing too hard. Why does this happen, and what can be done about it? Well, sometimes it can be pressing too hard. If the wood is really soft, it tends to happen a little bit more. What I find is if the bearing is not spinning freely, that can happen. So you're getting, well, here's another thing. Sometimes there's oil on the bearing. What you're actually seeing is oil on the surface, but that shouldn't last forever. It should kind of dissipate over time. But what I found is anytime I see a bearing mark, typically it's because the bearing is not spinning as freely as it should, right? So check the bearing. I mean, it sounds like you already did, and maybe that's not the case. Typically, that's the only thing I could think that it would be, is a bearing that's kind of getting held up. It's not spinning freely. As a workaround, I would like to see this not happen. for you, but as a workaround, if there's nothing is working and you still want to use that bit, I mean, getting a different bit is certainly a possibility. It's not a great solution, but get some blue tape or masking tape, put that on the edge, let the bearing ride against that, and that's going to give you a little bit of a protective barrier to prevent the wood from getting all, dinged up and get that like ugly line across there.
Tommaso said, that's easy. You let us make those comments.
Okay. All right, last one I have here.
Did you get Dan's? I think Plan D had one that came in later. Okay.
Peter Villaluz says, I'm thinking of adding a face vise to my workbench. The bench top is 2 laminated butcher blocks from the big box store. The installation instructions for the vise call for the rear jaw to be at minimum 3.5 inches wide by 3 3/4 inches thick. This hung me up, and I had to look at the instructions to figure out, I think you meant 1 3/4 thick, because that doesn't make any sense. It's almost 4 inches thick. That doesn't make any sense for a add-on face vise. So I think it's 1 3/4. How do you recommend attaching the rear jaw piece to the underside of the bench top? Do you think glue would be adequate, or should I try to reinforce with screws? But I'm not seeing a good way to drive screws into the back of the rear jaw without the possibility of them coming through the front. Now, I did have the instructions here, but I got one page for you guys to look at. As you can see there, it's got 1 3/4 minimum, right? So I think it was just a typo. So, well, I would certainly do some sort of a mortise and tenon in there, if you're going to face mount it like that. Some mortise and tenon joinery, a good amount of glue. You might even, you could put some reinforcement behind it with additional glue blocks between the 2 points where the holes are there. You could probably get some additional reinforcement with that. You could drive screws down from the top and then cap them off later, straight down from your top and into that rear jaw. That's a possibility. Another thing you might consider, I don't know if you want to do the extra work, but what about actually notching out, what about notching out your bench, right? So whatever the thickness of that thing is, trace it out, cut a notch, and then now you can actually set it in. That's going to be a lot stronger than some of these other options if it's just kind of face glued to it. So I would think about doing that if it's possible, and then you could always just get a couple of screws, countersunk screws through the rear jaw into your top, and now all the pressure you're putting on there is pushing into the thickness of your workbench instead of something that can kind of like start to bend.
So Chris and Todd both were talking about the Festool Merca review. Can you talk about the differences between a 3mm and a 5mm sander? Is there a noticeable difference? Do you have a preference? And then Todd said, we want to see a follow-up sander video compare a 3 and a 5.
So both questions are about the 3 and 5?
Yeah. Are you up to buying 3 more sanders?
Yeah, we'd have to come up with some tests to evaluate the swirl pattern. So if you're not familiar, random orbit sanders, as they spin, they oscillate and they kind of go on an elliptical pattern. But you put those two motions together, and what you get is like these little squiggly lines. Now the idea is that pattern is hard for the eye to see. But on lower grits, you see it. As you go up to higher grits, the pattern is still there. You just don't see it as much because it's much finer. But if maybe you're sanding a little bit too hard, different types of abrasives, something goes wrong, sometimes you still see those things in the finished product. And especially if you get like a magnifying glass and look at a surface that's been hit with a random orbit sander, you can kind of see those things. So the idea being the 5 is more aggressive. It's a bigger travel path that it's taking. It's more aggressive, but it also tends to leave larger, more noticeable swirls. The 3 is a little bit smaller swirls, so you don't see them as much. So in the ideal world, if you're being super picky, you might go from, take the 5 all the way through your grits, and then on your final grit, you're at 220, do your last run with the same grit, 220 again, but on the 3mm sander. And that, again, I think it's overkill. I don't really worry about that. But if that's what you were concerned about, that would be one of the ways you could deal with it. I think if you're only going to get one, I recommend getting the 5. I think the surface is good enough, and it gives you a little bit more power in the sense of like you remove more material in the same amount of time. So yes, I think we could see like what's the practical difference. We could do things like maybe sanding some plexiglass and looking at what the pattern looks like. Trying to sand, other woods and then taking very close not microscope, jeez. I'm not going that far,
You're going to buy a microscope now?
A magnifying glass to really see what's going on the surface and see if we can get some results.
Honestly, I wouldn't put it past you to do that.
I might just go get a microscope now. That's what I do.
Greg wants to know, what's a good finish to use on a pressure-treated pine for an outdoor sofa sectional? It will be covered with cushions out in the direct elements here in Florida.
I don't work with pressure-treated material.
No.
I don't like it. I'm not a fan. It's not my favorite.
It's not my favorite.
Just because I don't want to touch it, right? I don't want my kids to touch it. I don't want to be around it, but that's just me. So I haven't really done a whole lot of research into what finishes are happy on pressure-treated material. I don't even know if you have to do anything special with pressure-treated, with regard to finish. I'm going to throw this to the chat room. There's probably a lot of people in there with more experience.
Because you did a whole
pressure-treated
finishing video like 2-3 weeks ago, outdoor finishes, but it wasn't pressure-treated.
But none of the material was pressure-treated, and that could change things.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't have a great answer.
Cassie Nicole, I like your name.
Huh.
I'm fed up with plastic nail. What's another
Plastic what?
plastic nail? What's another hole or scratch filler that is sandable, paintable, but less porous? Is she talking about Timbermate?
Plastic nail. I guess that must be a brand.
It must be.
Of filler. What's another hole?
Sorry. I read it. I figured you.
Sandable, paintable, but less porous. Okay, well, usually if it's, sandable, that's one thing. Paintable, I mean, the porosity is what makes it want to drink in a finish, right? Whether it's a clear finish, a stain, or a paint. So I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to recommend something that does exactly what you're looking for because you want less porosity. Oh, geez.
I'm seeing if I can.
I used to use a product called Famawood. And if I remember correctly, I don't remember it taking stain quite as well as something like Timbermate. Timbermate's one of my favorite fillers because I find it to be more natural and I find the porosity to be very helpful. Famawood, F-A-M-O.
Oh, I was going to do P.
I think it's like a 2-part mixture. Back when I worked with Cody, he used to use it all the time. And it's a really strong filler.
There it is. Well, look at that.
But I don't really know if it's going to do what you want it to do. I don't use a lot of fillers.
Yeah.
So, but check it out, research it, see if people talk about, porosity and if it's something that doesn't absorb a whole lot.
Latex wood filler. Yeah, read the comments. There's like over 1,300 comments.
It says, won't crack or shrink, solvent-free, can be sanded, drilled, and planed. Well, it does say stainable and paintable. And stainable typically means it's going to absorb stuff. But again, the staining and painting sort of, they go hand in hand. You still want paint to kind of get into the surface if you can. So
Famawood.
There's a couple things to research.
I never even heard of that. Famawood. There you go. There's a
Okay,
link.
well, hold on. Lars has a great idea. I'm just thinking of commercial fillers, guys, but he's right. You could just mix some sawdust with epoxy, and that would create something that's going to be hard, durable. I don't know about sandable. I mean, you can sand epoxy, but it's not fun to sand. And it certainly is not going to be porous.
Al says
Scuff it up, you could paint over it.
Bondo.
Bondo's an option, too.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you buy that, like there's a furniture repair stuff. I think Minwax makes it. It's pretty much Bondo in a yellow can because it's got that little, I actually think the activator is like, going back, Nicole.
Going back.
Into the archives.
There's like,
I believe the activator is the same stuff you put on your face for zits.
Oh, really?
Like benzoyl peroxide. Somebody check me on that. I don't know why that little tidbit is locked in my brain, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Because there's Bondo all-purpose.
Yeah.
And then there's wood filler.
Yep. I would go with the wood filler.
Yeah.
If they have a specialty version for that. Because you use Bondo on car bodies and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there are some things
To check out.
Yeah. Bondo accepts paint and stain beautifully.
Beautifully.
See, when you get a filler, I think most people are looking for it to absorb more than not absorb. And that's why I think the epoxy might be a good solution. You're heading down a path of something that doesn't want to absorb anything. All right, what else? Are we done with the show?
Almost.
We're getting close.
We're getting there. Let's see. T-Camp, do you plan your day working at home or do you mostly feel it out with your schedule?
Come in here, I see John, feel it out. He doesn't mind. I do have a rough plan. Like right now, John and I are working on the bed for his daughter. That's the plan. So what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis? Well, the default is to work on the bed, but if something comes along that takes priority, Todd says this video is almost done, but I need one more clip of something, that takes precedence. I come in here, we do that first. So there's always a project we're working on, and then we stop and pause to knock a couple other things out here and there. So there is usually a plan, but not, you know, I don't think too much about it till I walk in the shop that morning and go, okay, here's what we're doing. I'm out of questions, so it's all on you.
I got a question here from Luther Woodworks. I'm going to refinish our 44-year-old 2-pine stair treads. Would you recommend Osmo or Rubio? I really don't want to use poly, as I don't want to have to sand them down again in a few years.
Yeah. Well, why would you have to sand the risers? I guess, is it like scuffing? So maybe he wants
Stair
something
treads?
that's easier to repair. Okay. You know what? They're both kind of comparable. The way I describe them is Osmo, I think you can get a little bit more protection and a little bit more of something that looks like a film. Osmo can be laid down and left on the surface. You can't do that with Rubio. You have to buff it all out. So you're really just relying on what binds to the wood fibers. With Osmo, I've got a coffee table, the one in the living room, is finished with Osmo, and I used the top oil, which actually rolled on for the last coat or two, and the wax actually built to what looks a little bit more like a film. And I find that to be extremely protective from spills and things like that, but also still easy to repair if we need to. So, I mean, in that case, we're looking at durability. I think they'd both be okay, but I would probably go with Osmo. We have a little home theater in the basement. There's a riser there. So I put a cherry hoochie around the border, and I used Rubio on that. And it's super smooth. It's holding up pretty great. But then again, it's not something we use every day, you know, and we typically go in there barefooted, not barefooted, like no shoes on. So if somebody does step on it, it's typically not a shoe that's stepping on it. So I would probably go Osmo.
Plan D Woodworks has a question about tried and true. I assume that you've used the original formula before, but have you ever used their varnish mix? How would you say that it compares in terms of final surface gloss, semi-gloss, satin matte versus a Maloof type blend or a walrus oil furniture butter?
Give me a lot there.
Sorry, this is like the last question.
The tried and true varnish oil, I love Tried and True. I mean, as a brand, got nothing against them. And I have a giant gallon of Tried and True varnish oil, which is what I use on a lot of my food stuff, like cutting boards, pizza peel, stuff like that. I have used their Danish oil, what they call Danish oil, and then their original.
So which one?
Varnish oil.
This one?
Nope, that's the original.
Oh.
So Danish oil.
Oh, there's the varnish oil.
Danish oil, varnish oil, and the original. Those are the three that
Okay.
I'm aware of.
Okay.
They're all the same. I mean, they're going to tell you they're not the same. Other people may tell you, they may have different opinions. They all look the same to me. They apply the same. The results are the same. They call it varnish oil, but there's nothing that you would normally associate with a varnish, like a film. None of that is in there. It still goes on. What I find it to look like is boiled linseed oil or pure tongue oil. It's very much just an oil. So I don't get a whole lot in the way of sheen. You probably, if you want some kind of a sheen, I think you're looking at maybe 10 coats. You got to do a lot of coats, and they're all very, very thin. Give them time to dry and then do another coat. Great product, but I don't know that I just haven't seen a whole lot of difference between them. But if I'm going to pick one, I want the one that at least on the label says it's going to do the things I want it to do, the varnish oil. I want it to have some resin in it, though I haven't really seen evidence that there is resin in it. That's just my opinion.
Then what's original wood finish?
It's oil and beeswax.
Oh, okay.
So how does this compare to Maloof? Well, Maloof has polyurethane in there. So I think there's it's a two-part system with Maloof. One is, if I remember correctly, like two types of oil and then, just diluted and wiped on. Once that cures, then he switches to an oil varnish blend. That is going to give you a sheen that's more like a Danish oil, but you do have poly in there. He'll just, the old formulation was to take a varnish or a polyurethane as one of the third parts, or is it fourths, thirds? I don't know. But it has poly in there, and that is what's going to contribute to a sheen. Go to furniture butter, and now you're talking about a oil and wax. Very safe, very natural type finish, but also more along the lines of what Tried and True will give you, which is not a whole lot of sheen. There's actually, I don't know if you feel like going to get it.
Not really.
There's a test board over there that was finished with furniture
butter.
Furniture butter. I will say that the furniture butter, because of the wax content and the application method, I actually do think you get a little bit more sheen earlier than you would on the Tried and True, just from my experience. So hopefully that answers your question.
Mark
Yes?
said that, another Mark, with a C,
Attaboy.
Chepels.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mark Chapelski, isn't it? Mark and Nicole?
I think it is. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
I got a memory like an elephant.
Varnish oil has pine resin in it and is thicker.
Okay, it can't be Mark and Nicole, can it?
I think it might be.
It's somebody. I know it's something with his wife or whatever.
Yeah, and I believe they sent me a picture of them watching us.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
What's the question?
No question. He was just saying there's pine. There's pine resin in it.
Pine is fine.
Pine is fine.
That's what they say. I don't believe it. No, I do believe it. I don't think there's any dishonesty going on there. It's my expectation of what happens when I hear someone say the word resin.
Yep, it was them.
There you go.
Yeah, there's the picture. I knew
Mark and Nicole,
yeah,
right?
Mark and Nicole.
But like when someone says resin, there's expectations, and that doesn't meet my expectations for something that is said to have resin in it. But I could be totally wrong.
Vincent wants to know what that is behind you. Is it the Millenium Falcon or the Enterprise?
Well, what do you think?
It's both.
It's both. So, what was his name? The Wood Nerd or something like that? He didn't even sign this thing.
Aww.
Dude, you got to sign your stuff, man. I think it's like the Wood Nerd or something. This was a gift from a guy who knows that I like both Star Wars and Star Trek. It says, I'm going to read it. That's how we're going to end the show. A long time ago, in a wood shop far away, you engaged an audience and emboldened them to go where none of them had been before, to seek out new methods and new creative opportunities. You helped the next generation, a lot of inside jokes here, gain a new hope. Thank you for making it so. You scruffy nerf herder. So, all in Purple Heart. Great stuff. That's what that is.
Greg said that his wife is mad at you because I told her you made me buy a Festool domino. Well, now you have to make her something.
Make something.
Yeah.
It's easy. You can get out of this one. Don't blame your crap on me. It's a good purchase. I approve. Okay,
right.
So you want to tell them what goes on after this?
All right, so we typically wrap this show up and we head over to our after show where any topic goes and it's more casual. Mm-hmm. So we just recently went on a camping trip.
Did some fishing.
We'll
probably talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you are a YouTube member, you just go over to the community tab from our page. If you're a Patreon supporter, I will put the link in the chat and you can click on that and it'll take you right to the video.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for watching, everybody. If you haven't seen the video we released today, go over and check it out either on our homepage, thewoodwhisperer.com, or on The Wood Whisperer on YouTube. Either place is fine, but it's a fun little video. All right?
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.